persuasive writing, such an important thing in the legal profession. Something you're going to get better and better at during your education, whether it be undergrad and then continuing to law school. Also in your legal profession, you'll continually get better and better just by doing it, as with anything. So we're going to talk today about the main parts of certain writings and how to essentially persuade the court through your writings. But let's first talk about just the parts of. We're going to start off really with it. We're going to kind of focus on the appellate brief. You may have a statement regarding oral argument where you tell the court whether you think oral argument is necessary. You'll usually have a table of contents, which will list out, it'll have a table of authorities within, it'll have all the cases, it'll have all the parts of the brief. You will have a statement on jurisdiction, on how the court has jurisdiction. You'll just have a two-liner statement. A lot of that stuff is boilerplate and just something you'll carry over from previous briefs. But the really important ones are the statement of facts or statement of authorities or statement of the case. It's called different things. Statement of issues, the summary of the argument, which will obviously be the most important thing, and then the conclusion. Within the argument, and we'll talk about it in detail, but you also have standards of review where you'll talk about the standard that the court is to use to come to the conclusion. But one thing I want you to notice on page 331 is notice how in that brief they are citing to every single fact. That's very important. A court will require you to cite to the record on appeal or to the record if you're just doing a trial brief. You must have a cite to that. You must be able to back that up, right? You can't just say something without backing it up, especially in the statement of facts. So what you need to do is make sure that every single sentence that you have in there in the statement of facts or the statement of the case, same thing, make sure you back it up with the record. And there are many different ways to cite to the record, but you have to make sure that the way that your jurisdiction is requesting that you're doing that, because a brief filed in the Fifth Circuit is going to be different than a brief filed in the Ninth Circuit on how they cite to the record. So essentially, you may have pictures or screenshots. I love using those visual aids within the brief. It looks fantastic. Judges love that. They like to see it. It's a lot more powerful if they can actually see something, like see maybe a crime scene or a picture of something that's very appealing. So do that when you can. Don't load it too much with those, but definitely have 2 or 3 pictures if you can show some demonstrative aids that will aid the court, right? So you need to make it interesting too. Make the facts interesting. You need to write them persuasively. But if you have something that's really, really important or really, really moving, put that in there. If there's a quote from a defendant that is just appalling, that is relevant, you obviously don't want to just try to arouse the emotions of the judges, but if there's something that's, there's a way to write where you're not just saying something's happening, you can show something's happening by a quote or, again, by a picture. Make sure your tone is professional. I know a lot of people, especially when I first started, I felt like that I always had to be combative or point out everything that the opposite side did, counsel opposite did wrong. Stay away from that. Stay away from that. You'll see as your career continues that the best legal professionals keep it professional, and you always stay on the high side, and you're not going to point out little nitpicky things about counsel opposite. So just be professional, remember who you are, and just write professionally, because a court does not like that, and a jury does not like that. I actually served on a jury one time, and I enjoyed when the lawyers were arguing, because I'm a lawyer, and I was like, oh wow, this is fun. None of the other jurors liked it. They did not like it because they were not professional. And I'm not saying the attorneys were not being professional, but there were times when, they were arguing or bickering back and forth. Juries didn't like that. They want you to be professional. They want you to get the job done. Same way with the judge. They don't want the bickering back and forth with other attorneys. They want to just read the facts and the law. Make sure when you're writing these facts, don't lose credibility. Don't fudge the facts a little bit. Don't add stuff that's not in there. Don't do that. Don't do that. You're going to lose credibility. And once you lose your credibility, it's gone. It is gone. And so make sure that you're always, again, if you're relating back to the docket or to the record on appeal, you're not going to add facts because it is what it is, and you're citing everything in there. I mean, you're citing back to everything that's already in the record. So just make sure you do that. Don't lose your credibility because once it's gone, it's gone. Don't omit facts that are bad for you, or change facts. You get the drill. Statement of the issues or question presented. There's an art in writing these. You need to be persuasive. You need to do it in when you're putting those, it's usually about 2 sentences, or actually, I'm sorry, it's usually 1 sentence. It usually starts off with whether. So make sure when you're writing those that you're doing it in a positive sense, not in a negative sense. In other words, don't have nots or no. Try not to. If you can, write those actively in active voice and not passive voice. Does that make sense? So just there's an art in writing those, and we'll get a little better at that. But the book does talk about it a little bit, but just keep in mind you want to be active in your verbs, and you want to have action verbs as well. So try to do that at the best you can. Sometimes you can't, but most of the time you can. Summary of the argument. This is where you're going to just summarize the law. You're not going to have citations to the law in here, or really even citations to the facts. You're going to be applying essentially applying the facts of the law here and just summarizing your entire argument. And mainly I'm talking about an appellate brief here. When you get to the argument, again, state everything in positive terms, not negative terms. Use active voice as much as you can. Remember, you're making an argument. There are ways to do that. There are ways to argue in a certain way. And really, y'all, looking back at the brief as a whole, when you get to the argument section, IRAC's a good method, right? It's definitely a good method, but there's kind of an updated method that's becoming more and more popular that probably with your appellate brief is probably better. It's called the CREARC method, CREARC, and it'll be in your materials. But essentially, you start off with the conclusion. You say what you want. Say, the appeal should be upheld, or the judgment of the court should be upheld, or the judgment should be reversed, whatever your position is. Then you're going to put the rule in there, which is essentially going to be standard of review, and then you're going to have the law that applies, or the cases that apply, or the statutes that apply to your case. Then you're going to have an explanation, the E and the A. A is analysis, so explanation analysis, where you're going to be applying the rule to your facts, right? Just like in IRAC under the A. And then this is important, the next R is rebuttal. So if you're basically responding to whatever counsel opposite has argued, or it will, or you believe will argue. So, you may say the defendant states that X, Y, Z. However, this is why that's not correct. So, but it's important that you put your explanation or analysis before that, because you want to be in the stronger position. You're arguing your position first, and then you bring up his or her arguments after that, and then that's when you're going to essentially rebut their position. Does that make sense? And then lastly, the last C is conclusion, like it is in IRAC. So again, use short, simple sentences, short paragraphs. Love screenshots, love pictures in there. Don't have a paragraph that's a whole page. Have 2 or 3 on a page. But essentially, the things we talked about earlier in the year apply here as well with the appellate brief. You need to make sure you follow all those. Note it's always good to update the Blue Book stuff, and the pinpoint sites at the very end of the chapter. They talk about pinpoint citing. Make sure you're up on that, because that's always important. That will be important in this brief. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you.